Today, I'm going to share 3 questions that I learned about from other people who have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives, in their work. And we are going to use these questions as a way for you to tap into and unearth your power and your potential and your greatest self. And these are questions that determine who you really are. Don't you know what these questions are? Of course you do. That brings me to the very first question that you're going to ask yourself that determines who you really are. And this, I got to give all the credit to none other than Terry Crews. Just in case you have no idea who this man is, he is a world famous actor, TV host, sitcom star, comedian, artist, best-selling author, children's book illustrator. And if that's not enough, he has been named People's Sexiest Man of the Year 3 times in a row. His career in acting spans for decades. Like, this man is unstoppable. And so here he is being interviewed on Club Shay Shay by none other than Shannon Sharpe, who's an ESPN commentator and one of the most popular podcast hosts on the planet. I'm going to link to that interview in the show notes. You go watch the entire 2 hours, then you go subscribe to that YouTube channel. He is the best. I just love his interviews. And so I'm leaning in, I'm watching this interview that he's doing with Terry Crews. And so Terry Crews kind of starts the interview with the background. And like me, Terry is from Michigan. I'm from the western side of the state, Muskegon. Terry grew up in Flint, Michigan, and he talks about how even when he was a kid, he just had this huge passion for art. And art, believe it or not, I don't know if you know this, art is what earned him a scholarship to Western Michigan University. And when he got there, he walked on to the football team. Now, Terry admits in this interview, and he's admitted this in past interviews that I've watched with him, that he never really liked football. Football was just a way out of Flint, Michigan. And he admits, and I love this about him, he admits that even when he was in football, he didn't really apply himself as much as he knew deep in his heart that he could. And you're going to hear him talk about this in just a minute, that he, says to Shannon, like, you were a superstar in the NFL. I didn't really like it. In fact, I didn't fully dedicate myself to the NFL, and I can admit that to myself. And so they kind of talk a little bit about the background there. And then you learn that in 1996, after a brief stint with the Philadelphia Eagles, he retires from football. And that's when he takes this bold risk and he moves his family out to Los Angeles. And so it's now 1997, and Terry Crews has moved to Los Angeles because he is going to pursue his first love, which is art, believe it or not. He was an illustrator. That's what he did. Like, he moved out there to LA because he wanted to get into animation. So they're starting from scratch. They have a young family. His wife is starting to get nervous because they literally are broke. And she says to him, dude, what are we going to do if this doesn't work? Are we going to go back to Flint? And I want you to hear what Terry's response is.
I said, we are never leaving. I don't care if it happens when we're 99 years old, we are never leaving LA. I promise you this. I said, if we just continue to do this, because this is where I had kind of learned the mistakes I had made in football.
Okay.
And I didn't have another chance on football.
Part of his resolve came from the fact that he could be honest with himself, that he didn't throw himself completely into his NFL career. And he reflects upon this in the interview. And I just think this is a level of self-awareness and honesty that you don't hear from people very often.
You tell yourself you've been doing what you should be doing.
But deep down,
but then you eat the cake.
Yeah.
And you hang out.
Right.
And you do that and you stay up too late. And you don't go to bed. And you totally mess your stuff up. You show up late for the job interview and then be like, they didn't want me. They hated me. It's like, no, you showed up late, bro. And I totally had to be honest with myself, man. Start marking off things that I wasn't doing.
I just love that. I totally had to be honest with myself. And as he was sitting there going through that laundry list, weren't you reflecting on your own life? I was certainly reflecting on my life. The opportunities I squandered, the periods of my life where I did not put myself into it. College, did not put myself into it. Law school, did not put myself into it. Job after job after job, did not throw myself into it. And then I would have the audacity to blame it on something else. When you know deep down that you didn't give it your all, you didn't show up as your best. And so I want to make sure that you're thinking about that for yourself. Those moments in your life where you know you didn't show up in a way and tap into your true potential, and you did that. Because that's now the fuel that Terry Crews is using to keep himself going. Because success isn't just handed to you. You know, I often say to our daughters, who's actually out in Los Angeles pursuing a career in the music industry, it's not about how good you are on stage. It's about how long you are willing to be your best and to continue to show up and not quit. That's the game. Like, you think the game is singing? That is not what the game is. The game is showing up and tapping into your potential and refusing to quit. And to make the stakes even higher, Terry's not just starting from scratch. Like, he's just come from the NFL, where he's almost made it. Like, he knows how close he was to having all of the things that everybody's chasing. And so he's in this moment of the story where his job, believe it or not, is working as a janitor, sweeping floors. And he's telling his wife, we're not going back to Flint. I don't care if we are here till we are 99 years old and I never make it. We are not leaving LA. I am not giving up. I am pouring myself into this. And so he's setting the scene that he is going to do what it takes to make this work in LA as a janitor. He's going to figure this out. And so hear him tell you this moment.
Imagine, what if I'm sweeping this floor, man? Now, you understand, I'm almost in tears while I'm sweeping this floor because I'm going, dude, my life may never, ever get back to where I saw. Because once you're in the NFL, you at least see it. You see the money. You see the stuff. You're like, man, I'm there. I can touch it.
You see and then the nice cars and the jewelry. Oh,
you see the cars pulling out the lot. You see the jewelry. You see the people living the life and the press. And then all of a sudden, but it's gone. And it's gone.
Right.
And now you are back at square one. You are starting from scratch. You have a broom in your hand and you have a floor to sweep. And that brings me to the very first question that determines who you really are. A question that Terry Crews asked himself over and over and over again while he had that broom in his hand and was committed to doing whatever it took to pursue his dreams.
And I said, man, look, okay, imagine if someone was going to give me $1 million to sweep this floor. How would you sweep it? And these are the little bitty mindsets and I remember I was like, okay, I have to imagine I'm going to get $1 million if I sweep this floor correct. Because I had to play these kind of games with my head in order to get over the depression.
Right.
And I remember sweeping and sweeping and sweeping, and all of a sudden I forgot about my problems.
I want to make sure you heard that question. Imagine if someone was going to give me $1 million to sweep this floor. How would you sweep it? That's the question. That right there. And he called it a little game that he was playing to get through the depression. This is not a game. This is the way you play life to win. This is a question that you ask yourself to discover who you really are and what you're made of. Just ask yourself that. Like, think about your current job or the school that you're in or anything that you're pursuing in life right now. Imagine if somebody were going to give you $1 million to study for that class. I would get an A+. I can tell you that right now. I don't care if it was engineering quantum physics, I would get an A+. Imagine if somebody were going to give you $1 million to sweep a floor, to unload a dishwasher, to work on your resume. I guarantee you, if they were going to pay you $1 million, you would dig deep and you would show up differently. And you know what that question reveals? It reveals that there is hidden potential inside of you. It reveals a capacity that you haven't tapped into. It reveals a will and a desire and a motivation that is there that you can use. If you can ramp up how you show up, if you can give it your all, if you imagine that someone's going to give you $1 million, it means you can do it at any time. And that's what that question reveals. It reveals who you really are. And I think that this is so exciting. It's exciting to know that you're capable of more. It's exciting to know that there are periods of your life where, you're going to coast. Nobody's paying me to do this. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. And then there are times where you got to dig deep and you got to keep going and you got to ask yourself this question that Terry Crews did, because he didn't just ask himself that as he's sweeping that floor, struggling through depression, starting over from scratch in LA. He asked it in every single menial job that he had, from filing papers over at the Veterans Administration to doing security for movie sets. Here he is talking about how he used that question as he is standing on the lot, working as a security guard on a movie set, to tap into his own excellence and his own potential and a better mindset. Check this out.
But what I said is, what if someone gave me $1 million to watch this parking lot? I got make sure I have my batteries and my flashlight. I iron my clothes. It was a mindset that I said, I'm going to reverse that bad attitude I had in the league that didn't get me where I wanted. I said, now every job I have to treat like that. And what's so crazy is that I started to do everything like that.
Right.
Like every little, it created a habit in me that kept me going. And so it didn't really matter what people said. I felt like I was getting this imaginary reward.
Right.
If I just did a great job.
There is so much to unpack here. There is so much wisdom in this question. He's literally reverse engineering excellence and reverse engineering motivation and reverse engineering how you raise your own standards with one question. Imagine if somebody were paying you $1 million to do this. How would you do this if you were getting paid $1 million? And any change in the way that you would do something reveals that you have more potential than you're using. It reveals that you have the ability to push through something. And he used this to force himself to keep going. And a little bit later in the interview, there's this really interesting moment where they dug into depression and how real it is, particularly after playing football and starting over. And he had this realization where he was saying that he hadn't worked out in a year. And so he spent $25 to go to a gym and work out a month. And he had never spent money to go to a gym before. So here he's spending $25 a month to go to a gym. And he said he was so depressed, check this out, that he would just sit on the machine and read a magazine. Didn't even work out. But he made himself a promise that he would keep coming back 20 days, 21 days. And that habit, he's talking about a habit, something you repeat that then becomes who you are, turned into 30 years of consistently working out. And as he's reflecting both on this question that he asked over and over and over, imagine if somebody were paying me $1 million. How would I do this thing if I were getting paid $1 million? Which creates a habit of excellence, a habit of raising your own standards, a habit of putting your all into something. And here's what he learned about these tiny, small changes.
What I have to say is these things are what I call incremental.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one big giant thing. For me, it was always one little message, one little thing. And when I moved out here, I started trying to get my thing on animation because I was like, I'm an artist, so I could show you my portfolio. And I had my portfolio in at Disney, at DreamWorks, at Hanna-Barbera, all this stuff. But then at the same time, hand-drawn animation went out the window because Toy Story came out.
Right.
So all of a sudden, they was giving me my portfolio back like, that don't work. And then I got a chance to act. And the rest is history. I did not know that that was my destiny.
I just love his story. First of all, I had no idea before this interview on Club Shay Shay that his real dream was to get into animation. I knew he had moved to LA after he had retired from the NFL. I had no idea it was so that he could be an illustrator and work for a company like Pixar. How freaking cool. But the point here is simple, that these tiny changes, whether it's going to the gym every day and just showing up and sitting on the machine and reading a magazine, one of these days after day 22, you're going to get tired of that and you'll actually use the machine. But if you just keep showing up, the habit of showing up builds. And if you just keep asking yourself that first question, how would I do this if someone were paying me $1 million to do this? That makes it a habit for you to tap into your greatest potential and give it your all, no matter how you feel. And the reason why that matters is because how you do anything is how you do everything. How you sweep a floor is how you show up at an interview. How you file paperwork at the VA's office is how you pick yourself up after the first studio says, no, sorry, we don't need animation. And the man just kept going. Why? Because he had used these simple tools to tap into a greater potential within himself. And it's in the showing up that will ultimately open up the door that you've always wanted to walk through. And oftentimes, this is certainly what I have found in my life. You're gunning for one thing. And in Terry Crews' life, it was animation, Pixar. I'm going to be an illustrator. We're going to use the artistry thing. And as you are putting it all into being excellent at that, some door you didn't even realize was the one that was meant for you pops open and boom, you find your way. I have 3 questions that I am going to share with you, and we are going to use these questions as a way for you to tap into and unearth your greatest self.